township's waste hauler. So Dominic will be able to talk to us about the ins and outs of the recycling process and the do's and don'ts of proper recycling so that we can ensure that that whole endeavor is effective and efficient and cost effective and we're doing right by the planet. So if there's any questions or issues, we will turn it over to Dominic. And it's being recorded, by the way. It's not an issue for anybody.
Great. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. So, I'm Dominic Fuginetti. I appreciate you guys coming out tonight. And I guess I thought we would there's a lot of directions we could go with this. You could start with questions. You could dive into particulars, and we can do all that. But I guess, how many people have actually been to a recyclery up close? Have all of you been there? So some of you have, but some haven't. So probably a good place to start would be just an overview, a quick kind of, you'll get to see what happens at a MRF. And there's a lot of information. This will take about 12, 13 minutes or so. And then from there, I have a bunch of information I can share with you guys about things that we're seeing in terms of the recycle markets, what's happened from COVID, the China sword situation and how that pricing has actually rebounded in the last 5 years. And then we can talk about how to manage your stream, which is really why I think you guys are here. So let's get started with that. Let's see if this comes through. Okay. So a lot of you've probably seen a lot of that information, but some of you haven't. So it would be a good place to start. So do you have any questions? I know there was a bunch of questions that were sent to me, and I can answer them, but if you...
I have a few questions. But
Sure.
The first one, I noticed in the video that a lot of the plastic bottles still have the caps on. I thought you were supposed to remove the caps to recycle. Is that no longer necessary?
Yeah, so you should remove them. A lot of people don't, and they can be recycled. They're squashed together, and we have people that will buy them, but the direction is to remove them and throw them away because they're too small. They don't go in the recycle can. Obviously, you can see they just get lost on that sifter. But yeah, you're right about that. And even when people leave them on, you know, they pop off as they're being baled and whatnot. So, go ahead.
Hi, Dominic, I think the list of questions.
Sure.
Were submitted, I think they'll probably, because they were a collection of a lot of these questions,
Yeah.
so they would probably answer a lot of the questions that were, this list of.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can, do you want to go through them?
pardon me?
Do you want to go through them, or?
Well, things like the plastic caps, I
Yep.
think was one of those questions.
Yep.
Um,
Like, so,
is-
yeah,
For example, what about plastic plant or flower pots that are usually number 5s?
yeah, that's it.
Put them in anyway.
So, the recommendation on the plants is, on the number 5s, I should say, is they will get recycled. But if you have a local solution, that would probably be better. They're not separated in a way and put and reused as potting plants, if you will. They will get taken. The plastics with the highest value right now are the 1s, the 2s, and the 5s, obviously. The 3, 4, the 6s, and the 7s are being recycled. They just have much less value. So, and it takes a long time to aggregate into a bale.
So you're recycling number 6 polystyrene?
So all of it runs through the line, 1 through 7. It all gets separated out. It just takes a long time to grab that type of material and aggregate it into a bale. And we do find places for it, but there's very little value for it. It takes a lot of work. So what happens so this is Plano, Texas, right? But the King of Prussia Murph is basically the same. It looks just like that, maybe a bit dirtier, right? But I mean, because it's a little older than that. That plant I think is like 6 or 7 years old now. But there's a position in New York where they just market all the materials, and it's their job to basically sell off everything to the appropriate buyer. So it's his job to find a home for that sort of thing. And I think that's where a lot of the confusion around the plastics lies. So
when you say it takes a long time, just because there's not as many number 3s that come through?
yeah, it takes about a year from what they're telling me at the
So to actually have enough of those to put into a bale?
correct. Yeah. So
Is there a demand for all of the product that you're recycling? I understand that things like 3s and polystyrene and whatnot, there's a lower demand. but
sure.
1, 2, 5.
So the 1s, the 2s, and the 5s are extremely lucrative. So when you think about the recycling stream, think of it this way: half of it is paper, right? So paper and cardboard is like 50% of the stream. And the rest of it's the plastics. And the 1s and the 2s and 5s are what they refer to in the industry as high-value items. So people go after them. There's not a market for everything, and that's just the nature of the commodity. So now, what was going on for, I'd say, the late 90s up until 2010 was all the material was going into China, right? So these ships were all arriving with finished goods, and then the material would be loaded onto basically an empty cargo ship, sent back to China, and it could be separated there. So even things that weren't valuable the labor expenses were so cheap that when you ran the math, it still made sense to send it back 1,000 miles. But that's no longer the case. Obviously, in 2017, everyone's aware of the China Sword Initiative, which basically banned plastics and then later mixed paper. So with that in mind, I can show you some information about this. Yeah. So if you look at this recycling commodity trend, you can see on that left-hand line, we refer to that as China Sword. And so you see there's your 5 materials, the PET, the steel, the aluminum, the OCC, and the mixed paper. That's to the right. And then you can see each year about how much of a percentage we were selling, or what was in the stream. And so when you look to the left and you see that graph, that green line is an aggregate value of all the PET, steel, aluminum, OCC, mixed paper put together. And you can see in 2017, you start to see this basically a collapse in price. And it's really driven by that blue line, which is the paper. So when China stopped taking the paper, it really drove the whole value of the single stream material mix downwards. And then you see the pandemic, and what's happening here is you start to see all the values start to rise as there's more of a demand for these materials for a variety of reasons. And so here we are in 2021, 2022, and the value of a single stream ton is about what it was, pre-China Sword. So it's an interesting kind of turn of events that's happened. It's been, it's a good thing. I think, from an industry perspective, it was actually, it was a welcome kind of call to action to have the commodity values collapse the way they did, because you can see from that video, the key to this whole viability of recycling is the stream and how clean it is. Because at the end, you really need a clean product that you can market and sell for dollars. And so the focus on contamination and saleable materials, was needed. Because previous to that, there was money to be made in commodities. They would take, the idea was just speed up the lines, take as much material as you could. Even if there was contamination, it was okay, because at the end, it could all be sold off and shipped out of the country. But that's no longer the case. So ultimately, it's to the benefit of the recycling efforts that this all occurred.
Is your company able to do any, shall we say, lobbying to corporations who produce the stuff we don't need? There's a lot of plastic being produced, and it's on track to increase exponentially. And of course, it's all made from fossil fuels, right?
It is, and in fact, that's the driver of the value of the plastics. As the price of gas goes up, so does the value of these recyclable materials. We do have lobbyists, and we are working in Washington on those type of things. The most exciting thing I've seen that Republic's doing that's unique to the industry is in the West, I believe it's outside of Las Vegas, we're creating something called a polymer center. And the way recycling works now is, as you can see, a plastic water bottle, basically you aggregate them, they end up being ground up. And the term of art is downcycled. So it basically gets turned into something else, but not another water bottle. The aluminum can, that's different, but the plastics get downcycled. But with this polymer center, what's going to happen is all the materials from like Plano, Texas, or all these different MRFs, these material recycling facilities, will go back to this recycling center. The material will be cleaned, ground up, and then washed and turned into raw product. So it could actually be sold back to a bottle manufacturer. So that's really kind of in response to to what you're describing, where there's just a lot more focus and interest in what's really happening with plastics. So that's an exciting thing that's happening. That's going to come online in about 12 to 18 months. It'll start in the West Coast first, and then shortly thereafter it'll be brought east. I guess I'll just start, yeah, I guess.
On the video and on the screen here, I don't see any mention of glass.
So glass is recyclable. We use it here as landfill cover. So it goes out to modern landfill and Conestoga landfill.
Doesn't matter if it's blue. It used to be you couldn't recycle blue.
It doesn't, because we're not actually
You're not sorting it.
exactly the lower winded
So
material.
you could throw a blue bottle, a brown bottle, and a
You could for the purposes of what we're using it for. It doesn't matter.
What are you using it for?
Landfill cover. Landfill cover. It gets ground up, and then there's landfills. It's sold off because they need that material to basically keep the MSW down, and then they put topsoil over it. There's a whole process to seal up a landfill. So the glass is used for that. It's also used for other things, but that's the predominant use.
Real quick one, and then a couple others, just so that you can talk to.
Sure.
I noticed with respect to the envelopes, so I saw that address labels are not recyclable. I'm assuming that's standalone address labels, not address labels that are on an envelope. And what about those clear windows?
So the clear windows are kind of a great example, because the clear windows are paper and plastic mixed together. So you really just you want to separate them. And the other tip that was in, the reason why I thought that video was good, even though a lot of it was somewhat basic, there was good tips in there, because the point of that concept of if you can poke a hole through it, it's probably not a great idea to put it into the recycle bin. It's just too small. The line, basically, it can't track it. You can see why, mechanically speaking.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you some questions with regards to paper, and along the same lines, like this.
Yeah.
Kleenex box with the
Yeah.
plastic.
Yeah, if you could pull that plastic off, throw that away, you could recycle that
Okay.
that box.
It used to be you weren't supposed to put in waxy type of.
So the wax paper is a good question. The wax, it's really the same as a combination. You've got wax on top of the paper. And so you know how paper is recycled. It basically gets aggregated into a bale, it gets sent to the, but if it's waxed, it will never dissolve. So that's the trouble with wax paper.
This is a no-no as well.
Correct, yeah, it's trash.
But milk containers can be?
Yeah, that's a separate process, those type of containers. They're different than that.
Are you talking about waxy milk containers?
I don't know, I just hear milk containers, I think of those kind of the square ones, right? So not the plastic jugs, those.
It's just the wax paper that's the issue.
Okay. So is that recyclable?
What's that?
Milk jug,
Yes,
milk
there's
carton
one of that.
that's rectangular.
You want it in the
That's
recycling?
wax coated. Is that
The
recyclable?
wax coated,
The septic containers you're referring to?
A milk container.
Yeah,
that's wax coated. You know,
This
so
wax
just
coated
no-
paper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
with the cap. No, the answer is no.
the answer's no.
No.
It's not recyclable.
No.
It's not. So basically, it's paper.
Yeah,
Paper's good.
Yep.
This kind of paper, but not waxy or brochures. That's-
brochures are trouble with the laminate and all that. Now, ink is not a problem. Obviously, the ink, they have a de-inking process at the mills.
So like if you can rip it, it's okay.
Say that again.
Like if it's like sometimes there's brochures that seem glossy, but as long as you can rip and tear it, it probably doesn't have any sort of plastic on it, right?
Exactly. You're looking for paper. If it's paper, but if there's a coating on it,
Right, like sometimes you get stuff and you try to tear it and it doesn't,
you could feel that there's a
Tear.
plastic coating over
right,
top.
it like stretches.
Correct.
So
True.
at the facility, I think most of us, we get a ton of junk mail,
Yeah.
catalogs and brochures,
Mhm.
solicitations with these big stickers.
Sure.
We shouldn't put these in.
Well, you can, as long as you separate that plastic
It's got
off.
stickers in it as well, like address stickers with the gummy stuff in the back.
Yeah. So that stuff does get mixed in, and what happens is, it's a great question. That's that mixed paper line. You see that blue line right there? So it's a lower quality material. That was the first thing to go. Now, you can sell that material. There's some uses for it. But as a rule, you'd recommend just putting paper in. So,
I think that's, should be the message, because most of it's junk mail, and it goes right into, I've been putting it in recycle, thinking, oh, it's paper.
yeah, I think there's, how can we say this? So the paper recycling, you know, the 3 tips are, is it larger than a credit card? Is it mixed with other materials, which is what we're talking about? Is the paper dry? Does anyone know why that would matter, whether the paper was dry?
That's what paper weight, water weight, when you're buying the paper.
I didn't understand this. What it is if it gets wet, it starts to disintegrate. When it gets on the line, it starts to fall apart because it's fiber. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Does it take in cardboard?
Yeah, exactly. So those fibers, you want to keep them dry.
So on a day like today,
Yes, this is a perfect example. You could ruin a whole load of material with water.
To mix everything, you know, it messes everything up. If you just have cans, if you just have bottles, if you just have paper.
You would do it, but most people wouldn't.
You know, when the pandemic happened, everyone thought that there would be a lot more contamination, just because people were home. But it wasn't true. As people kind of watched and threw away things and cleaned out their containers and just got educated on some basic things, the material that came into the MRFs wasn't more contaminated. So a lot of people, that's a common thought, if you just separated things the way they did back in, you know, pre-1988, let's say. The trouble is, you're sending one truck out to pick up the township. So it's just not effective to, from an economic standpoint, send 3 different trucks out there to collect 3 different sources of material. And the plants are all designed to basically sift that single stream the way you just saw it. Yes, ma'am.
question about glass. If you have something like a face cream container that's a really thick glass, as long as it's cleaned out, is that recyclable, or does it have to be the thin glass like a beer bottle?
No, I don't think it would matter how thick it was, because it all ends up to be. Go ahead.
What is uncontained shredded paper?
Oh, so they just mean that if you're going to put shredded paper, this is a common question people ask. If you're going to put shredded paper in, what you should do is put it into a brown paper bag. And then it would be, basically, because again, it's all down to the line, keeping everything on that line and not falling all over the place. So.
But in a paper bag, right, not a plastic bag?
Correct, yeah, right? It's a good point.
But then you gotta staple it, yeah.
Staple it shut.
Staple it shut, I like that.
So, I was gonna say, message then we should give to the community.
Yes.
Or we should be aware of, that I think a lot of us know, the cardboard, then, first of all, break them down, because I go through the neighborhood, and people just throw the whole box, Amazon boxes, and the lid's left open. So those are 2 no-nos, right? You want it broken down?
Yeah, I mean, you want it broken down. I think the biggest thing with breaking it down is you end up ripping off the tape. That's probably the most beneficial part of it, you know, because, yeah, because because what happens is, again, what they're selling these bales of material. Like, for instance, I talked to the operations manager today, and we were talking about the PET load. If they sell it and there's contamination, it'll just get sent back. And so the recycler has to, pay for the shipping back and forth. And the same thing with the OCC. If the loads are not clean, even though they look clean from the outside, if they break it open, it'll just get rejected. And all that stuff kind of just adds to recycling. The biggest thing with recycling that you want to think about is you're picking it up in the same way that you collect the MSW, right? But with MSW, it gets sent to an incinerator or a landfill or whatever the solution is. And there's processing there, but there's this is a very labor-intensive, kind of focused process. So it's imperative that it's clean.
What's OCC?
Oh, sorry, old corrugated cardboard. The Amazon boxes. Yes, ma'am.
So how clean is clean? So the guy in the video was saying, rinse it out. If you have, for example, a tuna fish can that has kind of the oil substance on it,
Yeah,
if you just rinse it out, is that enough? If there's, residue around kind of lids, like on ketchup bottles, or,
yeah.
should you really take the time to do all of that off, or is it enough to really just rinse it and let it dry?
If you can smell the food or touch it, it probably shouldn't be in the recycle container. So, I mean, you don't have to, yeah. Again, if you can smell it or see residue, it probably shouldn't be in there. Yes, sir.
So those cardboard boxes that Amazon uses, and they don't really use a plastic packaging tape, it's more like paper tape.
Yeah.
You're saying that, is that okay, just to throw that box with that paper tape, or do you have to rip that paper tape off too?
I would rip that off. Because there's glue on there. So again, it's not a perfect art. When you see these bales, there's things that are mixed in there, and they'll take a certain percentage of contamination. But the biggest thing is it can't exceed a certain threshold. So for instance, one of the questions I think that was asked was, how much is actually recycled? And so I guess, the easiest way to think of it is for every 1,000 pounds of material that is brought through the King of Prussia Materials Recycling Facility, about 150 pounds of it is not recyclable. It's basically what they call in the industry residual, meaning trash. So if you really just focus on your part of, your blue bin, what goes in that blue bin, and really watch that, you can make a huge difference.
So I have a few more items, if you don't mind going down that
Mm-hmm.
list.
Sure.
So how about like, sometimes you get a canister, like a hot chocolate canister, where the sides of it is like a cardboard, but the bottom is metal. Do
Yeah.
you take that, or do we have to separate the metal from the cardboard?
I would separate the metal from the cardboard.
Okay.
Good question.
Yeah, that they will. There's more and more packaging that's like that. That's exactly the issue with. So the first sort of crisis in recycling was this change in packaging. So you had very simple things before, right? You had glass, you had newspaper, and you had your Tide bottles, right? And everyone kind of knew what was what. But as things evolved and computers evolved, everything became mixed. So go ahead.
And how about like lids to glass bottles, like the metal lid? Is that okay? You want metal lids?
It depends on the size of it.
Like a jar of pickles, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. Again, that rule of thumb, if it's smaller than a credit card, probably toss it. If it's not, and it's metal, then it could be thrown in the stream.
Got two more questions. So where, did you say your facility is where in King of Prussia?
So it's at 372 Henderson Road. It's right by the 202 and Gulf Road.
And where is that? In other words, what township? Is that King of Prussia?
It's King of Prussia. Yeah.
King of Prussia.
Yeah.
Okay, and do you offer like tours?
We do. It just depends on the season. We have to kind of plan them, and for instance, we just toured about 20 people through there. But we just need to kind of do some planning ahead of time because it's super congested in there right now because there was a fire at the Penn Materials Recycling Facility in Lancaster. And so all these tons that were going into that facility, which is very similar to King of Prussia, can process almost the same amount of material, it's offline right now. So we're picking up a whole county's other waste, and it's all being processed through there.
Well, I'll talk to you after about that.
Sure.
I'm thinking about, I'm involved with some Boy Scouts troops.
Sure, yeah, it's definitely something we've done that in the past.
Okay. The last question is, I'm also on the board of the local homeowners association. I think, do you have any, like a flyer? I don't know whether you're stuffing your bills with some sort of flyer that has all of this detail.
There's a lot of information, we could work offline that I could get you guys. There's a ton of different things that we have.
I think something short and concise.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's a lot of, there's things like that, there's more lengthy ones.
Page with big
Mhm.
print with a list of the
Yep.
items and either yes, no.
And if I don't have it, I can get it made, basically. So really, I have a pretty robust ability for that kind of stuff in a way that we didn't have.
Okay.
5 years
I'll
ago.
talk to you about that afterwards also.
Sure.
I was gonna say, on a windy day, you often see a lot of recycled paper, especially, I guess, because of the way, the trucks lift up.
Yeah,
recycle,
sure.
it goes
Mhm. Yep.
upside down,
Yep.
makes things
Yep,
everywhere.
down the road, you see containers.
And, I mean, it can be really bad sometimes, the streets, does Republic go around and pick up, or do you count?
We do. So typically, that would come in as a customer complaint,
Yeah,
and
that's
then,
right.
you know, a supervisor would have to go out there with a pickup truck and just clean it up. That happens.
You encourage us that after we notice, like.
Absolutely.
on the street,
We
call
want to
us.
know if you see something like that. That happens pretty regularly, so.
I'm really still stuck on this, the plastics 4, 6, and 7, which I just assumed I should put it in trash because of them not being as recyclable as I guess 3 isn't, as the 1, 2, and 5. But you really would encourage us to put it all in there?
So it's a great question, and I'm kind of going around and around in my mind with this. You have two issues here. So the program is 1 through 7. The line is built for 1 through 7. Right now, the market isn't there for the materials that you just referenced. But the way that these townships are granted through the state has to do with tons. So they have to aggregate tons. So every year, you report that you recovered 2,000 tons, and then you get money back based on that. So there's a rub there, right? And it's the same kind of question you get with the glass. Should we just get rid of the glass? Well, glass, yeah, in theory, that sort of makes sense. But then the back end of it is you'd be losing grant money. So it's a more complex question.
Who gets
So.
the grant money?
The townships. Yeah, you could see all that. I'm sure it's in your public records.
Yeah, we get about $30,000.
Yeah.
I get lots of packing peanuts, styrofoam, bubble wrap. Some of the bubble wrap is clear and some is green, implying it's recyclable, but it sounds to me like it's probably not.
Yeah, the styrofoam, I mean, obviously, you can use it for certain things, but not for the program that you guys have here. Just,
Can I comment?
sure.
If you save the styrene little beads or whatever, put them in a plastic bag, take them to the UPS store, they'll take them.
They don't take it anymore.
They don't?
No?
No.
And they have that.
Not all UPS.
Oh, yeah, you
This
can
one,
ask.
this one.
The one in Bloomfield takes it.
Okay, with COVID they stopped. Dominic, I think I told you that I live in a neighborhood that has a private contract with public services.
Yes.
And we don't have by default the covered recycle bins. I mean, a lot of us are still.
You have the 65-gallon containers that are open, or the 33-gallon containers that are, yeah. Mhm. Yep.
Why, why don't we just give us the right ones since we can't put stuff out and whatever like this?
That's what should happen, and we can do that. Typically, what you end up happening with these HOAs, though, is that there's typically reasons why, and they usually have to do with space constraints. So, but the contractors will do whatever you ask. Like if you write a contract that says, "Hey, provide us with sealed 33-gallon containers," they'll respond in kind and get you those containers. Yes, ma'am.
I really question whether rinsing a mayonnaise or peanut butter jar is gonna do much good.
Yeah.
It's better to put hot water and soap and just take it up, and it's not that much work.
I put it in the dishwasher.
Oh, you do? That's a good idea.
Take off the lid and put it in the
Yeah,
dishwasher.
that probably works very effectively. It gets so hot.
And
Yeah.
the other thing I was wondering about, the workers that are pulling things off the line.
Yes,
That must be really tiring, don't you?
it's exhausting. Yeah, and they do it. It's very cold.
How long is this shift?
They're 8-hour shifts. I mean, they have very strict worker standards that they have to adhere to, but it's not an easy job.
But are they doing that motion, for repetitive motion for 8 hours?
They move them around, but yeah, they are. And that's the other thing with the bags. You know, people often ask about, you know, can you break the bags? And you know, our general manager always, you know, she points back to, hey, these are people, and you're asking someone to basically put their hands into a bag. They don't know what's in there. It's just not a good plan. But you make a great point. It's certainly, and it's automated as much as it can be, right? You see that, but it's still not grabbing everything. It's not perfect.
So will you throw out those garbage bags for the recyclables, or do you actually keep them?
So we throw them out.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
That's what I think we should tell people.
That's what we have to, yeah, and we've started doing that to our own divisions. So, I mean, our biggest customer in King of Prussia is the Republic divisions, right? And if they come in with bags, they'll call them up and they'll say, we'll send them, they basically send them a bill for trash. So,
This is not recyclables here, but Republic picks up yard waste on a regular basis.
yes.
Where does that go?
That would likely go back to Barnside compost up in Litterack.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't, yeah, we have pretty good access to. So,
What about empty prescription bottles?
I would say, if you know, removing the labels. But again, they're kind of small, right? And that's exactly, kind of falls into that concept of it might end up on the ground. So,
How much is incinerated versus
recycled?
landfill?
That's a good question. So, they're pretty close. So the incinerator, I think in Delaware County, is charging Delaware County about $75 a ton right now, which is similar to what you'd find in a landfill. I mean, personally, if you look at a landfill and you look at an incinerator, the landfill seems like a fair approximation of how you would dispose of it if you had to, rather than, you know, burning it and sending in.
Do you own your own landfill, Republic?
We do, yeah. In fact, and we actually, BFI owned that burner in Chester and sold it, you know, many, many years ago. So,
That's polluting, isn't it? Burning trash.
it is, it's causing a lot of controversy. That particular plan, and, you know, obviously the one in, yep, Covanta, yeah. And it's funny because in 2008, if you recall, it was a kind of different push, if you will. The push was that you were using this trash to steam plant to create electricity, and that people looked on that very favorably. But that's turned, so I think those incinerators are on their way out. It's just a matter of time. So,
Just please clarify, because I can't hear everybody at the same volume level. Are we or are we not to take the tape off of boxes?
if you could take the tape off the boxes, that would be the most optimal solution.
That's helpful.
That would be the way to do it. Yep.
And recycling that comes to you in a plastic bag is going to be thrown away.
Plastic bags with recycled materials will not get recycled. And the other thing that people do, I think they think they're doing something helpful. They'll aggregate all the containers into one big container. But as you can see from the line, it won't be able to read, right? Everyone does that. I mean, you would almost think it's a good idea to do it that way, but you can see from how that works that it sort of defeats the purpose.
There was a reference to a rigid plastic that, when they were optically looking at something. I
Yeah.
thought that would be like a detergent container, but apparently it wasn't.
I think what they mean by rigid plastics, they're referring to like what you would, you know, maybe carry soda bottles with, or, you know, just heavier things. And so that type of material can get recycled, but they have to actually push it to the side and find someone for that. It wouldn't be the Tide bottles. The Tide bottles were actually, you know, one of the most favored materials that we had. That's why that polymer center that I was talking about earlier, I think is really exciting, because, again, a lot of these questions are because of the way plastics are basically downcycled. But if you can stop doing that, and you can actually capture the material, turn it back into a raw form, and then sell it, you know, then you're somewhere different than where we're at right now. Yes, ma'am.
When you buy a plat of plants, it comes with plastic, can you recycle those plastic trays that you buy the plats of plants in?
You could, if it was cleaned, you could, you know, but that's the kind of thing where maybe you could return it to where it came from, and that might be a good idea as well.
Well, we've asked the very place.
Yeah,
They always say recycle.
yeah, you can.
And I ordered it
Mhm.
back.
Yeah, it can handle it. The line will take that type of material.
And, sorry, I came in late, so you may have already said this.
Sure.
So what I'm hearing is that when I have paper I want to recycle, I collect it over the week and I put it in the paper grocery bag and then throw the bag in. It sounds like you want to do stock in the bag.
An open brown bag, I don't think would be a problem because of the way that line works. It would ultimately get all pulled apart. It's the sealed bags that are more of an issue. So, the brown bags are actually fine. So, yes, sir.
The tape that Amazon uses, though, you can never get it all off. It's some kind of a paper tape with stringy stuff in it. You pull
Yeah.
it off and the strings still stay there.
Yeah, that's fine. Again, just do the best you can with it. You know, again, really thinking more of the plastic tape that, you know, when you sell something on eBay and you're extra careful that it doesn't break open, that kind of thing. So, yes, ma'am.
So just to clarify, with respect to the plant containers, so if they're clean, they are recyclable. I know you say the preference is if there's a local use, like take it back, but I've had the same experience.
Yes. Yeah, you can recycle them. Yep.
There is a place on County Line Road, a garden shop, I can't remember their name, they will take.
Oh, they will?
They have an area there that says, where you recycle, you can bring all your pots and.
Yeah, that's optimal.
County Line, Hallmark.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you foresee in the future that plastic, single-use plastic bags will be recyclable?
I foresee people trying to eliminate single-use plastic bags. That's kind of where I think this is going, because they weigh so little, and they're so difficult to deal with. I just foresee with when people think about the problems of plastics, it's really those bags that are kind of at the ground zero for that.
So I'm thinking also about, like the plastic bag that bread comes in, which is a bit heavier
Yeah.
than your garden variety shopping bag, I guess. So, you know, by the time manufacturers decide to stop making these things.
Sure.
It's going to be years. There's no way to incorporate those into a recycling.
We haven't developed an economically viable way at this point for that.
You guys don't, but I mean, there are, like, all of those you can take to the recycling box outside of Giants.
Correct.
No, any film,
Mhm.
they sell the trucks and they make.
Correct, yeah.
stuff out.
What we're doing, what I'm referring to is the blue bin program that you guys have
Right,
here.
you guys don't take any
Correct.
plastic film.
Yeah, obviously, like the styrofoam, you can, in theory, recycle styrofoam. You just have to be able to get it somewhere where they can do it.
Right, well, they do right, they're up in Shellfire now, they used to be right up here.
Sure.
That Northeast Foam Recycling, they'll take, not like egg carton recycle, like you can't bend it, it has to break.
Gotcha.
So like the stuff when you get a television, that hard, the white polystyrene. Right.
I think that though in general, I mean, we should remember that like recycling is like the third choice of the reduce, reuse, recycle.
Yes.
I mean, the answer to everything is not just to be able to recycle it, it's to raise less. I mean,
Well,
you can't always avoid it.
Yeah, I mean, and if you listen to these, and I'm sure you guys do, you know, when you follow these zero waste initiatives, at the end of the day, you're trying to draw down how much waste you're producing. And the recycling, it really needs to be done in a very kind of focused way because it, as you can see, it uses a ton of resources. There's just a lot of, the reduce and reuse is definitely the way to go. Yes, ma'am.
Is there anything you can do with padded envelopes, or do they just have to go to the trash?
Yeah, those are not recyclable at this point. You can just keep reusing them. Yeah.
It says this plastic bag is recyclable. Well, it does say store drop off. It's announced on out.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to get the label off of it,
Yeah.
the paper label, which is doable.
It's not nice, that's all.
We're not through them. Well, not through them, but through the store. Plastic bags.
So I think what they're referring to is that there's the recycling emblem, and then there's the insignia of the 1 through 7s, and they're basically telling you that, you know, what the type of material is. And in theory, the material might be recyclable, but with the way the system works, in reality, it doesn't work. That's all. I think you get that. So, yes, ma'am.
Books.
So books can be recycled, provided you rip the, if it's a hardcover book, just take the hardcover off. But the paper books are fine.
Store receipts, which is probably smaller than, I mean, CVS for, gives you. And it's made, it's not real paper, it's that thermo, whatever.
Yeah,
That's no.
not according to what I'm seeing in KOP.
But the shredded office paper is okay if it's not in a closed bag?
If it was in that bag and it wasn't going to just kind of fall all over like the way that receipt example would. So it's the weight of the materials essentially.
Paper with staples and it used to be just throw it, it's okay with staples, like office paper.
Yeah, I mean, we don't get dinged for that.
Just throw, throw your.
Yeah, see that like that right there wouldn't work. You would just want to separate that. Well, yeah, this is what that's what that was showing, right? So yeah, so there's just a couple other things that I can share with you guys that are happening, are just good trends to understand. What you have here is the pandemic volume for all of your waste, right? For all across the United States. On the left, you see year-over-year residential disposal change, and so you got Q3 2020. You see a huge spike in tonnage, and then when you flip to the right, you see the commercial disposal change. And again, this is just trash. So you see a total collapse in tonnage coming out of businesses, right? So it's inverted. Now, all that, the good news on the commercial side is that's kind of back to normal, as you can see at the end of the graph. But their year-over-year residential disposal change is still a bit elevated. It's about 5% higher than it was prior to COVID-19. So we foresee that to, be a continuing trend. That's good to know. Obviously, you guys we're all living through, the inflationary environment. We've always recommended to townships and municipalities and cities that if they were on contracts that were tied to CPI to get off of CPI because, well, for years CPI was very, very low, and so it wasn't a great arbiter. But now, of course, you're approaching like a 5% trailing 12-month average. Anyway, this is the price of steel. As you can see, is a kind of a high at the end of this graph, 1825. Now, the price of steel is just used for reference purposes. So when someone is thinking about picking up the trash in Upper Providence or Lower Providence or Lower Gwynedd, you have to purchase trucks and vehicles and containers and all that kind of stuff. And so the price, you can figure all that out, all that gets worked out. But the biggest problem we're seeing, and it's not us, it's the whole industry, is just basically an inability to acquire and procure things in a timely fashion. So that's kind of, if you're thinking about, with your HOA, switching haulers, that kind of thing. There's just a little bit more, transition friction than there was maybe 10 years ago. So that's just an industry-wide trend.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
So you really just, the labor shortages, right? And the cost of buying the vehicles to service, you put those two things together and people are stepping back and rethinking what they would have previously just jumped into because it was a good business opportunity. Now they're thinking, wait, if we can't get the trucks, what are we going to do if the community's upset? You see what I'm saying? It's a situation where you really have to be sure that you can service it. And in an environment where it's hard to get goods and people, it's more difficult.
So you're saying that our costs are going to go up for the recycling stuff?
So the recycling is buffeted a little bit because of the commodity values. That's really what drives. But I have seen very, very unusual pricing trends in the last 3 to 4 years. I've been doing this for about 15 years now. And in the last, I've seen very unusual things. For the longest time, you would see, Lower Gwinnett would put out a bid, and you would basically get a price that would be what you got 10 years ago. Because there's always someone that wants to come in and win the business and do a good job and earn a profit, let's say. But what's happening now is people aren't able to staff what they have. And you see this when if you Google, different communities around the area, you're seeing service failures. So all that I'm saying is that it's just a different kind of environment right now. Now, it's all cyclical. You can see from those commodity trends that I'm sure that will come out of this. But it's definitely something to look at. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any plan to, a lot of people are working from home now.
Yes.
And I know that office paper was highly valued. It was a lot more valuable, so we always would separate it in our offices, and that, it was supposed to be higher value to the recyclers. Is there any move with everybody working from home to allow people to create that stream for you from home?
So with the way the MRF is set up, it all gets put into one particular stream. Now, the economics of that could change, but as of now, I would say not. So, yes, ma'am.
One more thing about glass, a jelly jar is fairly tough, but if you toss a wine glass into the bin, it's going to break. Is broken glass a problem?
Broken glass is fine because it all gets ground up as well.
And nobody puts their hand in, so they might get cut.
So, don't put broken glass into the bin. It all ends up to be broken is what I should have said. So, thank you. Let's see if there's anything else I can share with you guys. This slide really just addresses the national CDL driver shortage that we're familiar with. And really what it comes down to is there's just less people stepping up to the plate to become CDL certified. And so, you're seeing what ends up happening is you have drivers that are, older, they're well paid, but there's not enough people coming onto the field to replace them, kind of like the Eagles after they won the Super Bowl, right? So that's cyclical, but it's definitely something that's real and a factor into everyone's thinking right now. So Lower Gwinnett has a system whereby you guys have containers, and a truck comes with an arm and picks it up. And so you should be commended because that type of service with the one-man truck and the automated arm is a much more favorable service, looking forward. The trucks are a little bit more money, but it's a service that's a little bit more durable than a traditional kind of rear load, two-man driver helper team where they're running back and forth, picking up picking up in a dangerous fashion. It's not desirable. So it's good that you guys have that system.
Pie plates, back to the aluminum.
Yeah. So the pie plates are fine if they were clean. Yeah. Yeah, so again, this is basically, what is it saying here? Empty, clean, dry, we've talked about that. The poke test, we've talked about that. You don't want it in a plastic bag, obviously. So you can, metal cans from vegetables, fruit, or beans, that's fine. Again, as long as it's clean. And even the aluminum foil, that's a common question that you get, just as long as it's not soiled.
Right, so the pie plans are like the takeout, or not the takeout, but, like the chafing trays when you have something catered, as long as they're clean.
That would be fine. Yeah, that would be good material.
So, it used to be that those aluminum can pop tabs were supposed to be the most valuable part of that can, and special recycling device, so what can you do anything with it if they're not a baggie full of something, they're just caps, the tabs, can you do anything with it?
No. Yeah. That's a good, I was like, I'm trying to think of a good answer,
Put
but,
it inside the aluminum can.
yeah.
Put it inside the aluminum can. Stuff them in
It's a good idea, yeah, you could do it that way, right? And that would, you aggregate more material. And it is aluminum, right, so that would work, yeah. Obviously, razor blades would be a no-no, everybody knows that. And then obviously a picture of what, a good container would look like, versus maybe a container that would be found in a less well-educated neighborhood.
So, on the paper one, did you have, I've seen people put paper napkins in paper.
Yeah, that's
That's listed as a no-no, or?
that's trash, yeah,
Yeah,
it's trash.
pretty obvious.
Mhm. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Dry cleaner hangers?
Uh,
The hangers you get from the wire hangers.
Take it back to the dry cleaner.
Well,
Yes, yeah, I would take them back to the dry cleaners. Because again, it's the combination of material. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Pizza boxes, how about if it's clean, if it doesn't have grease stains on it?
Yeah, you can just rip the top. So,
I saw on your website, it looks like there's maybe special recycling for fluorescent bulbs?
There is.
For the,
Yep.
for the long ones?
Yep. Yep.
So is that something that we would have to contact for public?
Yeah, we would have to do a kind of one-off for that. But we do handle that. We do, the bulbs, various e-waste. It's very expensive though, frankly. It's, it's not, it's a specialty service.
Then you talk to them and they have no idea what you're looking at the containers, what you're doing. Regular for revenue?
The batteries are kind of a particular nuisance in the recycling stream. They cause fires.
We collect batteries here.
Correct. Yeah, you do a good job with that, but I mean, that's typically when you see these fires and these MRFs, that's oftentimes the source of it. Yeah. Which likely was what happened at Penn Waste. So you could say it's catastrophic, really. So,
Even though it's not acceptable anywhere, right?
it's not. Yeah, you're not supposed to do that, right? So it's like throwing away a TV.
Is that what happened to Lancaster, to your plant in
Yes,
Lancaster?
it's not our plant. It's just that what I was saying was that plant went down, went offline, and all these, it's an infrastructure, right? There's a waste and disposal recycling infrastructure, and all these companies are connected and work. They're not connected, but they work together. So we'll have tons that were going there. They can't go there anymore, so they're coming down south, east, I should say. Anything else, guys?
I don't think you currently do, but again, do you ever foresee recycling clothing?
There's places that do that. We don't currently do it, but I can get you in contact with people that do that, because they do recycle clothing for a variety of things, like.
Even for rags, you have rags are torn, something torn, you can't really take it to a thrift store. What
No.
do you do with that?
Yeah, like I said, there's companies that handle that sort of thing.
Do you know of any?
I do. Yeah, I do. And they use that material's. Go ahead.
If you take the clothing clothing to a Goodwill or one of those places, they generally sort out, keep the good stuff.
No, sir, I
And
asked.
I know there's a place in the North Bend Industrial Park that he bails up bad clothing and it gets sold off as
Where
rags
is this
and,
place?
what's that?
Where is it?
But you can't take it there. They get it from the bigger people.
Oh,
And you
no,
just
I
process
called
it.
Goodwill and the thrift store here, Liberty, they will not take it.
Hmm.
They will not take it. Oh, I specifically asked.
Oh, okay.
When it used to be Impact.
Yeah, say impacted.
These people will not.
Yeah, there's companies that do that kind of thing. So. Well,
Thank you very much, very.
yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate everyone coming out. It's been it was really great to go through all this stuff, and every time you do it, you learn a little bit more. So thank you.
So remember to sign up for emails if you haven't, and then we, whatever information we get from Dominic.
Yeah, and as far as like different materials, we can talk offline, but there's definitely things that we can do. This gentleman asked for signs, that kind of thing. So. Yes. Actually, can I send you an email? I left my wallet in my car. I apologize. Yeah, here, just right here on this. Yeah, that was great. Hello. Just put it on there. I'll send it over to you. Yeah, write it on there. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not promising I'll be able to either, but go ahead. Yeah, sure. The EAC, yeah. Mhm. Yeah. No, you are, okay, yeah. 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 Yeah, yard waste, yeah. Compostable, yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Trash and recycle. Yeah. It was single stream recycle though.
Well, it's the,
Okay, and I'll get in contact with you and we'll figure out exactly what you want. It's not a long time. It's a quick turnaround to get whatever you need made up. Yeah, it's simple process. All right, thanks.
so, anyway, I bought a house here in Brooklyn
Yeah,
a couple years ago, and I did a huge amount of grinding.
yeah,
I buy topsoil
yeah,
to fill in.
yeah.
So pull out all the weeds flow to the soil.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and so I will in a single week maybe do an active season, maybe 8 bags.
Every week.
Yeah.
So it's your thing. That's good.
Yeah.
No, it's okay. So eight.
But it's all going in trout. In other words, according to the contract, I can leave 4 bags out, which I do.
Yeah.
But if I
Well, you have a yard waste pickup, right? So you have there's two yard waste pickups.
Oh yeah, but if I generate 8 bags.
No, I understand. You don't have a weekly yard waste.
No.
Yeah,
And
I get
don't know how
that.
to start one, and not only that, I sometimes I wonder why I'm one that mows my own lawn.
Yeah.
This is a community, and even animals.
Of course, yeah. They have people come in and do it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So even though I'm on the EAC, I'm not pushed hard.
Yeah.
Or out there barrel.
Yeah, one of you guys, couldn't you like aggregate the material and then take it to, I mean, you could hire someone to do that, right? Like, if everyone, places have yard waste drop-off sites.
Yeah, like Drescher does.
Yeah,
Right down the street.
that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like that's probably the way, because that's going to be a lot cheaper than,
Right. Now that's a whole facility. They got pylons there, long screens of.
how far is Drescher from here?
Oh, it's just 10 minutes drive, 5 minutes drive.
Could you use it?
I don't know, my son lives there.
Yeah.
So I attempt to fake it.
Yeah.
By using his ID.
So you do, yeah. So yeah, no, I understand totally. I get it. I just think that the way to approach an issue like that might be to have the township approach.
Got it. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
In other words,
'Cause they all work
somebody's
together.
already doing this.
Somebody's already doing it, so you want to leverage that. It's like the e-waste. These guys in Delco, they'll get together and they'll have 4 communities work together. One runs lead.
Okay, so it's not something.
You don't
where
need to
I
do
could
it.
like I did in Ann Arbor, in Michigan, where there was just a bigger.
You don't want to do that because it would add a lot of costs
Yeah, sure.
to the contract, and it's like anything else. Though, if you have that service and people are used to it, then they need that service.
Yeah.
But it's like if they didn't have the service and they didn't know it, they don't even know what they're missing. It's that kind
So I
of thing.
should work out an agreement then between my township.
You should talk to the EAC at Drescher and say, hey, what kind of
Yeah. What can we do?
what kind of sharing?
Yeah, we
agreement
could pay part of it, and then.
They would like that.
Yeah, they would like that. Yeah. It's not just pressure. I think it's called Upper Covered Township.
Yeah, I know where it is. It's right down by. Yeah, so we're going to be doing the recycling for them, the whole consortium.
Okay.
So that's going to be it's Abington,
Oh, that's
Cheltenham. It's like 7 municipalities in Montgomery County. I'm sure you know. But what they did before was they had that transfer station, and then they basically ran the transfer station. Everybody came and put their recycling material there, and then they shipped it to a MRF. But now what they're going to do is just drive it all into King of Prussia.
Oh,
So they're going to get rid of the transfer station and go direct into the MRF, like that.
maybe we should be involved then.
Well, you guys are good because you have your own contract. So you effectively have the same thing, but you just, because you're not, so you guys don't have any public works costs, right? So you don't, yeah, because there's no, I mean, you do, you have some, but you don't have trucks, which are